Hello, welcome friends to the Ahava community. And today we are kicking off our live guest interviews. If you do not know me, I am Summer Colbert of Ahava in Our Hearts Ministry, and I am so thrilled that you are here. I can't wait to dive into this interview with you today. I know you are going to be blessed. So we are streaming across multiple platforms right now. So wherever you're tuning in from, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let's do some quick housekeeping before we get started. Since this is a new platform for us, we are using StreamYard. So if you would like to comment throughout this broadcast, if you'd like to just say hello, let us know that you're here, or even ask a question, we want to hear from you. This is all about community. But in order to do that, you've got to give StreamYard and Facebook the permission to display your profile. So if you want us to know who you are, go ahead and hop over really quickly to StreamYard.com/Facebook. It's a really quick click of a button and you can give permission to share your profile and we can know exactly who you are. Lastly, if you would like to share this message with your friends in this interview that you are watching right now, go ahead and create a watch party. We would love to get this message to as many eyes and ears and hearts and spirits as we possibly can. Okay, so the housekeeping checklist is complete. Today, I'm so excited, y'all. We are joined by I'm so blessed to say friend, Angie Gibbons, and we are going to add Angie to the stream now. Hello, there she is. This is Angie. Guys, hello, this is Angie. She is a writer and speaker whose passion is to help women trade stress and fear for a restful and faith-filled life. She lives with her husband and 3 daughters in Hawaii. Y'all don't get jealous. We struggle with that anytime Angie and I talk. I'm like, don't even tell me what the weather's doing right now. They minister through their locally through their church, and they love to do some small wave surfing. So you are going to be able to connect with Angie and all of the resources that she offers at her blog, which is angiegibbons.com. And you can also connect with her on Instagram at Angie Gibbons Writer. Angie, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. I've been so thrilled to talk to you about anxiety today. This is a topic I'm super passionate about, and you'll be happy to know it's really rainy and gloomy today. So no need to be jealous.
That's good. So that's perfect. We are talking about for the next several weeks on these interviews, the things that hinder us from being able to love well. And when I put this series together, Angie was the first person that came to my mind. She and I share a similar passion for helping women who struggle with anxiety. We ourselves struggle with anxiety and share very similar stories, which I want to dive into more. So let's just get started with the fact that anxiety, it's a common term, right? It is something that we toss around pretty normally in our conversation. Sometimes it's flippant and sometimes it hits on a deeper level. And what I want to point out in our interview today is that the Bible mentions anxiety regularly, and it shows us that God cares, that he wants to walk us through this very real struggle. So let's just start, and I want to pitch this to you, Angie. Let's just define anxiety.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm like you. I think anxiety is just, for a lot of us, it's just part of the way that we function and see the world. And I think that the misconception a lot of us have is that anxiety is a panic attack, or anxiety is something that we can't function through. But the reality is a lot of us grow up just functioning with anxiety, and it's just part of the way we operate, right? It's like our kind of nervousness, distractedness. It's the way that we're constantly worrying about things or wondering, what if this happens or what if that happens? So I kind of think of it as like a lens through which you see your world. And I think that helps define it for a lot of people of like, oh, that's what I'm struggling with. That's why life feels kind of hard for me. I didn't realize it was actually anxiety. And a lot of us just, we kind of grew up with that. There's no shame in that, but either in the environment we grew up in or just kind of the way we're wired, we have that bent towards feeling anxious a lot.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And I think there's so much power in being able to put words to that and to be able to identify it. It seems like it has less of a power and a hold over you if you know what it is and you can kind of claim it. So can you, for our listeners, go ahead and, give some of those definitions? I know you have put out in some of your resources in the past, just ways to define that so that people can kind of realize, oh, this is actually anxiety, what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows up, like I said, in a lot of different ways for different people, but it can be really simple things like, like I said earlier, like worrying and ruminating over things before they happen for long periods of time. You're laying awake in bed at night and you can't stop thinking about the conversation you had earlier or the thing that's going to happen the next day. It can be difficulty being flexible, adjusting to different changes in your life. Definitely there are kind of the things we think of when we think of anxiety, like panic, illogical fears about things that might happen to us, things that might happen to our children. I think a lot of times anxiety flares up when we're older for this reason, because we have more people in our lives that we really care about, and things start to feel more intense for us. The stakes grow higher for us. It could be just nervousness, like social anxiety, when you're going into a new situation, that it's really hard to muster up the courage to do and say the things that you really in your heart want to be doing. And to me, this is the difference between like introversion. There are people who are less social, want to be less social, but I think anxiety comes into play when you're actually wanting to engage more in the world. You're wanting to fulfill things that God's put on your heart, but you find it really difficult to take those steps forward because this fear and anxiety is holding you back.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And I think because I definitely didn't label anxiety for myself until just in recent years. And I did come to a point of a full-fledged panic attack. And I want to hear from you, your story of that as well. But, when I was walking through really, really crazy, stressful seasons of life, my husband would get to the point where he would say, do you realize how many times you have had to sigh and get a full breath in just the last few minutes? And it became so second nature for me. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but he would count sometimes and even say, okay, in the last 5 minutes, you've done this like 15 times. And I'm like, really? I had no idea. But it was the way that my anxiety was manifesting to the point where it was affecting me physically. And I think that's something that's important for us to remember, that it's not always in our mind, it manifests physically as well. And so you're going to see that I also get a lot of tension headaches, and it would definitely interrupt my sleep in different ways. And it can sneak up on you in different ways at different times, but it all kind of falls under that umbrella of anxiety. So as we think about how that affects us physically and mentally, let's talk about how that can affect us in our ability to love our people well, whether that be the people that are closest to us, our spouses, our children, the people that we see on a regular basis, and then even just the people that we encounter, throughout our days on a random basis.
Yeah, this is kind of I would say like a touchy part of anxiety, because people who are wrestling with anxiety, it feels so hard already, right? It feels so big, sometimes so insurmountable, like you can't see on the other side of it what life would be like. But the reality is our anxiety is affecting people around us. That's right. And so I just want to say right off the bat that there's no shame in that. Nobody gave themselves anxiety or did something bad and caused it to happen. And there's no condemnation in Jesus. And that applies to everything in our lives. But the way that we interact with anxiety affects our relationships so much. And, I started to see it a lot with my kids when they were little, because I had never struggled with like anger, for example. And I was struggling with always being really frustrated and irritated at my kids for all these little things. And I would be like, gosh, I don't feel this way. I don't think this way about my family. Why am I so frustrated and angry all the time? And I was stuck there for a while because I wasn't recognizing that the root of all of that was anxiety, that I was frustrated because I felt like maybe I wasn't doing a great job as a mom. Like if I saw my kids doing something that I didn't like or I was concerned about, I would be like, I'm totally blowing it as a mom. And then the anxiety would rise. Or, they're interacting a certain way and I'm anxious about like not being able to control a situation, for example, like going out into public and feeling like, I'm not going to be able to keep all these balls in the air and keep the kids managed. And a lot of times it was small things too. I think this is another kind of myth, is that anxiety is about really anxiety provoking things like, hiking on a steep cliff or something. But anxiety usually builds in these little things that kind of add up. You start off with like a busy day, and then you add to that kind of a difficult emotional situation or relationship, and you add to that some kind of conflict or something, and it just accumulates. And then as a result, we end up not being fully ourselves. And I feel like a lot of times we end up not acting out of the love we actually feel in our hearts for the people around us. We end up acting frustrated, irritated, and even just our anxiety itself kind of ramps up the atmosphere around us, and we're anxious. And then, the people around us kind of feed into that and start feeling anxious as well, or like, gosh, oh, what's wrong with her? She's so unhappy all the time. Maybe she's unhappy with me. And I just say this with a lot of humility, because this is what I've been through, with my husband and my kids. And honestly, I try to see this not again as like a shaming thing, but as, man, this is a motivation for me to continue to seek healing, layers and layers of healing with the Lord, because I want to fully walk in, the love that he's given to me and the love that I have for my family and my friends and all of that.
I love that. And I totally can relate to every bit of that. And the old saying really is true. If mama's not happy, nobody's happy. And, when all of that, and it's so crazy how the enemy plays on that, because, you start that process of this little thing irritates me, and then it compounds one on the other. And by the end of the day, you are so miserable to live with, and everybody's just tense. And it's not this loving environment that you truly in your heart of hearts want to create for your home and your family, and giving that security of knowing that your people are loved and that you feel responsible for that. And then you lay awake at night feeling guilty for all of the things that you did wrong. And it just burns me up so much, the way that the enemy uses that. And to your point earlier, what you talked about, the shame surrounding anxiety, and I want to come back to that. But not allowing the shame of it to trip us up to do better the next day. And recognizing it's like, you can't be mad at yourself for not knowing what you didn't know. And that has been a struggle for me, very much so in my adult life, of, if I had only known this when my firstborn was born, I could have been such a better parent, compared to 14 years later. And I'm just now getting this stuff, and I'm thinking, I've been so hurtful to him in the past. And then, it just compounds on one another. So I would love to hear from you. Share your story of kind of your breaking point, that point where you talk about your anxiety flying under the radar to a certain point through your young life. And that was very true for me as well. And then all of a sudden one day it was like your body said enough, and how that led you to start seeing your anxiety for what it is, and then starting to take steps towards healing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I didn't have my first panic attack until I was 30. And like a lot of people, it kind of came on me suddenly. I was sleeping. I was sound asleep. I was visiting my parents' house, a really relaxing, enjoyable place to be. Yeah. And it was like my body had just put up with so much abuse, so much stress for years and years and years, that it just was, like you said, at its breaking point. And I had gone through a lot of really difficult things up to this point. I had gone through a lot of infertility and pregnancy loss and things. So I was carrying a lot of stress in my body. I just, again, didn't recognize it as anxiety. So when I had a panic attack, I was like, what is this? Oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I'm a Christian. I'm not supposed to be afraid. Right. And so that was kind of my first aha moment that I have anxiety. But honestly, it wasn't till years later that I really started to kind of be able to come to grips with it. And that really started, it was a kind of an inch by inch thing, but I felt like the biggest kind of leap forward with me was after my dad passed really suddenly in an accident. And I just had that burning feeling that I think a lot of people get when they've gone through some kind of tragedy, where you're like, man, I don't want to waste a minute living less than what God has for me. I really believe in the promises of God for me. And I have bought into the lie that this is the way that I am, and this is the way that I'm wired, and it's kind of the best I can do, and I think we have to give a lot of grace to ourselves for where we're at in that moment, but it doesn't mean we have to stay where we are today. And that just really fueled me to go, okay, Lord, what else do I need to do? How do I need to grow? And it kind of really accelerated at that point. And really, that's when I started writing more honestly and vulnerably about it and posting about it, because I just became so intentional, really.
I love that. And that's so true. And I love what you said about, I'm a Christian, I'm not supposed to be afraid. And we feed ourselves that lie. And so we stay in this place of isolation in our minds and we struggle alone instead of A, going to the Lord for help, and then B, going outside to somebody who has walked through it, who understands, or even professional level help. So, we hear the scriptures about anxiety. If we've been believers for any period of time, we know that, be anxious for nothing and fear not and all those different things. But I think we kind of file it away instead of really camping out and honing into those, because those are the scriptures that we need the most when we're walking through. And it's not something that you read one time and then just file it away again. That needs to be something that you sit in for long periods of time, especially during those seasons of higher stress and where your anxiety is manifesting higher. So what scriptures and biblical truths have you really leaned into as you have experienced healing and just a more confident walk in your battle against anxiety?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I feel like you kind of have to stick with it, right? You have to find the scriptures that are speaking to you, but you have to really meditate on them. And the one that's helped me the most actually is 1 John 4:18, which is where it says, perfect love casts out all fear. And the reason this has ministered to me so much is I grew up in the church. And like I said, I had this feeling of like, I can't be broken and messed up. I'm supposed to have it all together, which, it's so false. It's such a false narrative that we tell ourselves because we're all broken. We all have challenges. And I think that because fear comes up so much in the Bible, and it's like, do not fear and don't be afraid and be courageous.
Right.
I felt like I would read those scriptures, but it frustrated me because I wasn't sure what to do with that information, because I was like, well, I am afraid, and so it kind of forced me to shut down. And I feel like what helped me the most was recognizing that my motivation for walking out of fear was really the love of God. It wasn't some kind of mandate not to fear or like a judgment that something was wrong with me for being afraid or anxious, but it was recognizing that God's love is so great, so all-powerful, that he can carry every single little thing that I'm struggling with, that he's right there in the moment with me. And even if my stress is about how long the checkout line is at the grocery store, and that's what's elevating my anxiety, that he's right there with me and will walk through and carry me through that. Or if my stress is about my child who's, deathly ill, that he's right there and will walk through that with me. And so I felt like it was a new revelation of his love, and that it's his love and the awareness of it and just how much he cares for us and our needs, that's really what started to dispel my fear, was meditating on that instead of just like, okay, don't be afraid. Because I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. But really the character of God, I think, is what sets us free when we realize who he is and what he wants to be for us.
I love that. And I think you make such an important point that huge first step is realizing that you can step back from that anxiety. You don't have to just, spiral down with it when those fears are planted in your mind, that you can pause and you can choose where your mind goes from there. I love one of the things that you said in one of your articles on your website, and you asked the question, what is it that I'm believing about my situation or about myself, and is it true? And then you replace whatever lies you're hearing with God's truth, and you meditate on it through worship, through just honing your mindset back towards the Father, the truth of who he is, the truth of his love for you, and the security that you have in him because you are his child. I was reading this morning, our friend Kathy Baker posted on her Facebook group, and she said something, and I was like, I've got to throw this in here. She said, we are the gatekeepers of our minds. And just because a thought knocks on our door, it doesn't mean we have to answer it or make it at home in our minds. And I was like, mic drop. Yes.
Yeah.
We really do have the ability, we can lean into the strength of Christ and God our Father to protect us from whatever it is we're afraid of. But we also get to make the choice of where we allow our minds to go. And I absolutely love that. And I feel like we can just stand on that and be able to, like you're saying, stop and take a step back and look at it from a further viewpoint of, don't get tunnel vision and just see the fear or the situation or whatever it might be. Stop and pause and don't let your mind run away from you. So what would you say has been your greatest tool in being able to step out and overcome just the bondage of anxiety in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's exactly what you're saying right now. And just kind of to add on to that, or to give a practical application, what I started doing was, when I was in a situation where I was starting to feel the anxiety come up, once because first, once you have that awareness of, oh, this is anxiety, then you can stop and go, okay, what is that coming from? What triggered it? Have I been feeling this way an hour? Did it start yesterday when I had that difficult conversation? What was it? And then from there, you can kind of unpack, what is the fear underneath the anxiety? Because it's usually something down deep. It's not right in the moment, right? It's something down deep. And like the example I gave earlier with my kids, it's like a fear that something is going wrong, or that if I can't control this situation, that, it's not going to go well, or I'm not being good enough. I'm not performing well enough, something like that. And once you get down to that, then you can pray about that, and you can surrender that to the Lord. Because I feel like even reading the scriptures and meditating on them about anxiety, it's a wonderful practice. It's a great thing to do. I think those things should be deep down in your heart. But I think that's where I got stuck. And I think maybe where a lot of Christians get stuck is they're trying to do these spiritual things, but there's no practical application of working on their mind and their thought process. And those two things can go hand in hand. It doesn't have to be kind of like a psychology approach or a spiritual approach. I think that they work together, and God uses that. So that's been the biggest thing for me, is to stop and say, what's really going on with me? Why am I really acting this way toward my husband? Or why am I really feeling this way? And then another question I think that's really helpful is, what is the worst thing that could happen? And to kind of explore that with the Lord. What's the worst thing that could happen? And God, are you here with me in this? Will you meet me here and take this particular fear away? And, will you be with me? If that worst thing happens, which usually anxiety is about worst case scenarios that never happen, right? The things that we fear will happen in life are not the things that usually happen.
That's so true.
Contrary to the saying. And so I think that, it's just kind of having a conversation with God in those moments, and kind of unwinding that thing that you've gotten tangled up in. And what's so amazing is once you start doing that, even if you did that once a week or once a day, it starts to become really natural to you. You start to become more aware, you see it more easily, and you can more easily walk out of it, because you're like, oh, I know this one. I know this lie, and I know what the truth is about this. I know that everything is actually going to be okay. And then your body starts to listen to your mind and relax and have more ease. And I feel like it's just like, once you get going, it spirals in such a good way, towards more and more freedom.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important thing to remember, is that you can retrain your brain. Just like you were saying, you don't have to accept and say, this is just the way that I am. This is something that can be changed by the power and grace of God, but also me working next to him side by side to make those choices. And it has to be habitual. And I love the thought of being able to say, okay, give myself permission to name whatever this is, whatever struggle it is. Name it, and then claim it for whatever it is. Is it truth or is it a lie? And then take a step forward. If it's a lie, then you toss it, you reject it, you rebuke it, and you go on. I love what you say, talking about, kind of look and see the man behind the curtain, what's really going on behind the scenes. It's like, this is what I'm upset about right now, but what's really bothering me? Just like you said. And I think that's so important for us. And it all comes back to that whole thing of time out. I'm going to stop. Instead of just embracing the frantic and continuing to just let things spiral, you stop in whatever situation. And I think it's so healthy for yourself, and it's going to be healthy for your family, your kids, your schedule, your coworkers, everybody that you encounter in the long run, for you to go, I'm taking a moment so that I don't react in a hurtful way. I need to step back, and whatever that looks like for you, stepping out of the room and do it in a way so where your people understand, I'm not mad, I love you, but I just need a moment. And, maybe you even create language within your own family to where everybody understands, when mom says this, it means she needs to step back and take a moment. And then being honest about our struggle. You know, your kids especially, they see and they would like to understand why mom is upset. And I think it's okay to share that with them at age appropriate levels. Okay, this is something that mama struggles with, and she has to go to Jesus regularly with it. And we're all, you know what I mean? Just having that transparency, and that's going to give them freedom as they come into their adult lives. We all struggle with something, right? You know, and for a lot of us, it is anxiety. And so being able to name that and not give them a hang up about it necessarily, but just saying, okay, this is something that's very real. And it's something that I have to go to Jesus for regularly. And he is walking me through that. It's not something that I'm accomplishing on my own, you know, and just leading them back to, we have to walk with Jesus when we go through these struggles. And one of the things that I absolutely love, and a truth that I have just gone back to over and over again. I have a good friend. He's she's one of our teaching pastors' wives, and is a great friend and mentor of mine. And she said to me when we met not too long ago, she said, you know, every decision you make, Summer, is not fatal. And I'm like, whoa, because I didn't even realize that that's how I was thinking about things, especially like you were talking about when it comes to our kids and feeling that weight and the responsibility of their success, health-wise, spiritually, education-wise, you know, all the things that we carry the weight of. Every decision we make is not fatal, because ultimately it all still comes back to the fact that God is in control. And it is just to us to step back and to regularly, for those of us who have anxiety and want to grip onto the details and want to fix and control everything, to be able to go, okay, God, I'm giving it to you again. Okay, God, I'm giving it to you again. However many times it takes, you know, throughout your days and weeks and months, you know, just that continual surrender. And I love that. I'd like to come back to, and you had alluded to this a couple of different times earlier in our conversation as we wrap up, the shame that Christian women experience, whether it's real or perceived, whether they really are being shamed by somebody or whether it really is all in their mind. That shame that they experience that hinders them from taking that next step and seeking help, and whatever that looks like for them in their life.
Yeah, I think the important thing for us to realize is that everybody has problems. We all have problems.
So
and I
true.
think especially in our social media, you know, centered culture, it's easy for us to hide our problems, to pretend like we don't have problems, but we all do. I've got problems. And to recognize that anxiety might be kind of our bent, or like the thorn in our side, but somebody else has a different thorn in their side. And we're all broken, and we're all coming to the Lord for healing. And so I feel like working out of anxiety, it's really just a discipleship process. It's part of our maturing. And, you know, Paul talks a lot in the Bible about us going on to maturity. And like you were saying, how we talk to our kids and we say, hey, look, I've got to talk to Jesus about this. I feel like this really is it's just a part of our discipleship of learning to trust at a deeper level, to trust in really practical ways, you know, for it to not just be our theology, but something that we can use and apply in our everyday lives. And then we bring our children along into that, you know, and we kind of normalize their brokenness as well and go, hey, look, these are the tools that you need to walk with Jesus and to grow and mature. So I like to think about it that way, that it's just, you know, it's an opportunity for healing for us. It's an opportunity for growth, but it's also an opportunity for ministry, because every single thing that God does in our lives, he's like, okay, turn around and bring that other person along with you. Bring along that friend who's struggling with anxiety. It just, you know, that's just how the body of Christ is supposed to work together.
That's right. Exactly. And I think the enemy uses our anxiety to prevent us from doing just that, because loving others well and leading them along, bringing them alongside in the journey to follow after and chase after God is our ultimate purpose. And that starts in our homes, with our husbands and our children's. You know, we're all supposed to be walking towards him. And if the enemy can use anxiety to trip us up, he is going to feed lie after lie after lie into our minds. And it's a weak spot. It's that thorn in our flesh. I called it in an article earlier this week. It's a thorn in my mind, because it truly is. But being able to identify it makes all the difference in the world, and being able to love others well and fulfill our calling and whatever that looks like, however that plays out in our lives. You know, we each have a ministry. If we're breathing and we believe in Jesus, we have a ministry. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be from a pulpit or a platform or in any way. It's how we interact with others. That's our ministry, and how we point them to the Father. So as we're closing, what encouragement, Angie, would you give to the woman who's listening today who is ready to take that next step towards acknowledging and stepping into a freedom from that fear and anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, just kind of recapping some of the things that we've already said, definitely get some key scriptures and put them up around your house, put them in your car or on your mirror, and just get into a habit of meditating on what is true and good. Because anxiety it's a form of meditation, right? We're meditating on what's going wrong and what we don't like and what we're afraid of. And so we just need to switch that story that we're telling ourselves and start speaking truth and life to ourselves. So I think that's really important. And then, just practically speaking, I think they're just very simple things that we can do to lower our anxiety in the moment. We can give ourselves a lot more margin in our day. People with anxiety really struggle when things start to feel kind of claustrophobic around us, or we feel too busy or juggling too many things.
Yes.
And just start saying no to things that are not essential. Give yourself some breathing room. Eliminate those things that are super stressful that you can eliminate, and really just start focusing on kind of what's the next thing. And I still do this today. Actually, I did this morning. I had to drop my kids off at school, and I was driving, and I started to think about my day, and I started to think like, oh God, I'm behind on this. And it's like, my mind started kind of ramping up, and I'm like,
Yes.
No, I'm going to go home. I'm going to do this wonderful interview with Summer. That is the only thing I have to think about right now. I got to drive, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to let everything else go because I can't do anything about it right this moment.
Yes.
And that sounds super simple, but it's very freeing. And it helps you to keep that anxiety level from, constantly going up and down.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And I echo that. And it's funny that, sometimes it just takes us a little while to figure out that it's the simple things that really do make a difference. Meditating on scripture, and then just making up your mind to focus on one thing at a time. And then those healthy no's. I think those are excellent points that you made. And I have to remind myself regularly that there are going to be days where I'm just killing it and I'm getting thing after thing after thing done.
Yes.
And then there's other days where I'm laying face down on the couch, and that's okay too, and not condemning myself for whatever day I happen to fall on. It's just real life. And turn off Instagram on those days and don't look at how everybody else is killing it, because today you're not, and that's okay. But those are such excellent points. And I'm so grateful for your wisdom and just the fact that you relate to so many of us, and you're just giving voice to the things that we may not necessarily say. So guys, if y'all have enjoyed this chat with Angie as much as I have, and you would like to hear more from her, you can, as I said earlier, follow her on Instagram at angiegibbons.writer. Or please go check out her website at angiegibbons.com. She's got some amazing resources. She's been featured on multiple platforms and podcasts, and her ministry is blessed. And we just pray that God continues to grow and bless your ministry. So thank you so much again for giving us your time and for sharing your journey and your story with us and how God is continuing to grow you. If you enjoyed this interview, there are more coming. And you would like more resources, here are some different ways that you can connect with us. You can go over and join the private Facebook community by going to facebook.com/groups/Ahava community group. I'm going to put links to all of these things in the videos after we finish out here. If you would like to just get all the resources straight to your inbox and not have to go looking for me, I would love to serve you straight into your email inbox. You can be added to my list by going to ahavainourhearts.com, and then you can click on Ahava Community, and there is a form there where you can subscribe. And then lastly, come over and hang out with me as well on Instagram. Angie and we hang out a lot on Instagram, just at Summer Colbert. So thank you so much for joining us today. Y'all mark your calendars for next week. Wednesday, March the 17th at 12:30, where we are going to be continuing this series about things that hinder us from loving well, and our conversation will be centered around the topic of assumptions. I'm really excited to dive into that one with our good friend Rachel Adams. Thank you again for sharing your time with us today, and I pray that you have been encouraged, and now you can feel confident to go out and love your people well. Thank you guys so much, and thank you, Angie.
Thank you. It's been great being here with you.
Thank you.